My name is German Franco. I am a meteorology and earth science student from Florida International University, and this is my second YouTube video that I'm making regarding my predictions that I make for every coming month about natural disasters and other possible earth events and the days on which they can happen. This video is for July 2014. My predictions are based on my own method for predicting natural disasters, which involves the use of astrology and numerology, particularly Chinese astrology and numerology, in order to seek days that could bring natural adverse events to the earth, and also use my scientific knowledge from the classes I've taken to pinpoint where these things could happen. I am the proud author of this book, which is titled The Prophecies of NUTStradamus. In case you haven't seen this book in the first video that I made, you may purchase it on Amazon, and embedded in the book will be an in-detail look at how I came up with this prediction method, how I use the astrology and numerology, and how I make it all tie together with science and earth science and meteorology to come up with predictions, which, by the way, go all the way up through the end of 2015. So you have at least another 18 months worth of predictions there left for you to read if you want. Now, a little bit about myself in case you still might not know me from the first video that I made. My name is German Franco, but I'm also known as FireRat on the Spiritual Paranormal Prophecy Forum and other forums derivatives of Prophecies.us, which is a forum and website dedicated to an alternative look at predictions and other paranormal sort of things that may happen in our world around us. And I've been a member there for several years now. I will provide a link at the end of the video if you would like to follow me and watch and see my own predictions that I post there on a month-to-month basis. At the end of the video, I will give the link. As well as for the book, I'll also provide a link for that. Now, let's talk about July 2014. What could we have happen this month? Well, for one, it might start out a little bit on the regular average sort of side. We have a few dates to mention. We will begin with July 2nd through July 5th, which is a 4-day period that could bring severe weather and tornadoes with possible significant flooding to parts of the world. Damaging winds and hail are also a possibility on this time. We are most likely to see this somewhere in North America, particularly north-central United States to the northeastern U.S. and anywhere in the northern tier, or possibly out over Europe, particularly maybe central and northern Europe could be seeing this kind of event as well, as we are now in northern hemisphere summer. A second possible scenario for this date, however, could involve a tropical storm or a typhoon that could take place and affect land, potentially bringing significant flooding and heavy rains. Watch the Atlantic and the Western Pacific and Eastern Pacific closely as we near these days in case something does take form. Last but not least, for this date, a third possibility, we could be talking about a strong earthquake that could take place during the time, most likely on July 2nd and July the 5th. Now, while this forecast may sound a bit scary, the magnitude of the earthquake would most likely fall somewhere of magnitude 6.5 and a 7.0 and have moderate impacts most likely. As far as risks go, this date period is what I consider a moderate risk. Moderate risk for me means simply that the time frame could have a 15% chance for natural disasters to strike on this date. Moderate risk is about 10 to 15% for something to happen, and July 2nd through the 5th earns a 15% chance for something to happen, so definitely it is a period worth mentioning. As we head on a little further into the month, we now have the date July 9th. This day could have a strong earthquake, possibly between magnitude 6.0 and 6.5, or at least an earthquake that would cause this type of impact relating to this kind of magnitude. It is a day that it stands alone by itself, which indicates it has the possibility for sudden events to take place on this day. Therefore, earthquake would be the first choice. A second possible scenario would be a severe weather episode that may result in flash flooding triggered by heavy rains on this date. Flash flooding is another form of a sudden natural disaster, and being July, which is summer months for many, this could be a very strong possibility still for the date. Landslides and mudslides cannot also be ruled out. We can't rule out that these things can happen because they usually go hand in hand with heavy rain episodes, and even earthquakes can trigger landslides. And a day like this, which is sudden in nature, is one to watch for these things. The good news is, however, is that this is also a moderate risk date, which only has a 10% chance now for having a natural disaster occur. One of the possible scenarios that I mentioned, most likely. But it's only a 10%. Therefore, it's more likely for something not to happen on July 9th than for something to happen on this date. But regardless, it deserves mention, because it is, after all, where risk dates begin to be considered a risk date, which is this 10% thing. 3 days later, on July 12th, we have another similar setup. This is another sudden looking date in which the most likely event would also be an earthquake, possibly being a little stronger in the 6.5 to 7.0 magnitude range. And it could have impacts ranging from moderate to significant wherever it hits. A second potential scenario would be a severe weather and tornado outbreak, in particular tornadoes, because they tend to be more sudden and fast occurring events that could happen on a day like this. Last but not least, flash flooding, landslides, and mudslides are still a concern on this type of sudden looking day. Like July 9th, July 12th also is moderate risk, but just has a little more percentage for possibly having an event happen. We're talking about a 15% risk for natural disaster on this date. So definitely worth mentioning as well. It is comparable in risk to July 2nd through the 5th. Once again, watch North America and Europe for the potential weather events, and earthquakes, keep an eye out on areas that have had recent earthquakes, such as Alaska or New Zealand, or even more typical risk areas such as Indonesia or Southeast Asia, Western South America. So as of now, I've talked about the first half of the month. It has its risk dates, but it overall doesn't look so bad. The second half is a totally different story. We now have a very long risk period coming up. This period is July the 16th through July 31st, month's end. This extremely long risk period is very prone to having a major flooding event. In fact, the number one scenario I would select for this date as a possibility would be a massive, widespread flood or potential major river flood affecting a wide area, somewhere in between all these days. Days that have so many back-to-back risk periods, which in this case happens to be 2 weeks, are prone to having prolonged flood events and other long rolling time natural disasters. A second possibility would be that we could have back-to-back severe weather outbreaks during July 16th through the 31st, and this could also lead to the flooding events that could come forth. In third place, we could be talking about a major earthquake that may happen during this time frame. This major earthquake could be very powerful. It could be magnitude 7.5 all the way to 8.5 on the Richter scale, and even the moment scale for that matter, leading to potentially severe to devastating impacts should it happen. With such a big risk period covering so many days, if I were to single out a few days for this earthquake event, which could be more likely for it to happen, it would be first place the days around July 28th, which happens to be the most powerful date within this risk period. I would also mention July 16th, July 22nd through the 23rd, and July the 25th as other possible big earthquake dates within this long period. A tsunami cannot be ruled out during this type of powerful risk period, because if we do get a big earthquake and it happens out at sea, we will have the chance for a tsunami with this kind of magnitude that I'm forecasting. So definitely keep that in mind as we head into this long last period of July. Looking down on my own scenarios, just so you know, I'm actually reading my own predictions from the forum on which I posted them. This way I could convey them to you in an easier and more concise manner. Looking at the fourth possible scenario, which is actually still very likely, we could have a lot of tropical storm, hurricane, or typhoon activity during the July 16th through the 31st period, and they could be back-to-back events that may affect land. The most likely location this time of year to look for would be the western Pacific Ocean, around Japan, the Philippines, China region. They tend to have activity by this time of year. And if we do get a lot of storms hitting there during this period, they could also lead to the big flooding event that I'm forecasting for the whole period. So all these potential scenarios sort of go hand in hand with the potential flood that I'm forecasting. We should also watch the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Eastern Pacific in case something decides to form around there and also threaten land during these dates. These heavy rains could also produce flash floods and mudslides, which would also be the fifth possible natural disaster for this time period. I would suggest watching Southeast Asia and other parts of the world that may be experiencing heavy rains by then, and even the areas that may see the severe weather and or the tropical storms. And last but never least, on such a strong period like this, volcanic eruptions should not be ruled out. They are definitely the least likely of all the scenarios, but on a period like this one, they're worth mentioning, because a day such as July the 28th or the 16th or the 25th, 22nd through the 23rd, they all have a bit of a tendency to have this risk for volcanic eruptions as well as just the earthquake. But nonetheless, it is the last possible scenario and most likely will not happen, but it's still worth to mention. Now, with all this in mind, I would like to mention July 16th through the 31st is a high risk period. High risk, in this case in particular, July 16th through the 31st, is a 40% chance for a natural disaster to strike during the period, and a 30% risk that this disaster could be severe in nature, with the first three possibilities being the big flood, the massive severe weather outbreaks, or a giant earthquake. Definitely keep that in mind. This is the real meat of the month of July 2014. I will now do a brief breakdown mentioning which days we should look for which specific events, and even pinpoint some areas that may be prone to this kind of event in case you may have missed it in my previous discussion. For earthquakes, we should keep an eye out for the days July 2nd, July 5th, a little more attention for July 9th, July 12th, and July the 16th, as well as July 22nd through the 23rd, July the 25th, July 18th through the 19th, and most important of all, July 28th through July 30th. Earthquakes could be very powerful this month, should they happen, especially during this period, July 28th through the 30th, or the days just before. The main areas to watch would be the Pacific Ring of Fire, mainly along western coasts of the Americas, and also Southeast Asia and Indonesia. Also, just to be safe, watch the Caribbean region and the Middle East. And definitely watch areas that have had recent earthquake activity, such as Alaska and New Zealand, which both had major earthquakes back in June. For the big flood, the big river flood that I'm forecasting, watch closely the world's largest rivers, especially in North America, Central and Southwestern Europe, and Southeast and Central Asia. The days that are most likely to have this event are July the 16th through July the 31st. Severe weather and tornadoes are very likely on July 2nd through the 5th, July 16th through the 19th, July 22nd through the 23rd, and especially July 28th through the 31st. We may also see this event on July 9th, July 12th, and July 20th through the 21st, and July 24th through the 27th as well. There's many days that could favor severe weather here. But definitely look for the days in red and orange the best, because they're the more likely ones to have that kind of event. For flash floods and landslides, keep an eye out on July 2nd through the 5th, July 9th, July 12th, July 16th through the 19th, the 20th through the 27th, and again, especially July 28th through the 30th. For tropical storms, hurricanes, and typhoons, keep an eye out on July 2nd through July 5th, and most important, July 16th through the 31st. Volcanic eruptions, while rare, they can still happen this month, and if there were any days to keep an eye on, most likely be July 9th, July 12th, July 16th, and July 28th and the 29th, which are risky days for this kind of thing. The month's most intense risk days overall are July 16th, July 18th through the 19th, July 22nd, and July 28th through the 29th. Which all happen to be part of the same risk period, incredibly enough. So, with all this in mind, what could we expect in July of 2014? I mean, a summary of all these events, what could the world expect? Well, we might see 2 to 3 natural disasters this month occurring, and one of these disasters could be very severe in nature, just based on the probabilities and the amount of risk days that we have, as well as the intensity of the risk periods. It is a bit of a tricky month to predict, particularly because of that very long risk period we have in another month. But in fact, that last risk period, the long period, could be the one that may have more than one natural disaster in July. July 28th is the most powerful date of the month, with a level 9 out of 11 on my scale that I use for determining how intense the day is with respect to its astrology and numerology. And that level 9 translates to 40% risk for a disaster. And since July the 28th is within the July 16th through the 31st period, the entire period also adopts that risk level of 40% for something to happen. So I'm afraid we could actually see a major disaster in the second half of the month. So overall, expect a rather quiet, perhaps average start to the month as far as natural disasters go for the world. And then rapidly we could see a changeover to a very active period during the last 2 weeks of the month. The main stories this month will likely be weather disasters, flooding, and perhaps one very powerful earthquake. We'll have to be on watch as these later days of July approach. So right now it's June. We're still in June. It's June the 28th, 2014. Don't let these predictions scare you, and definitely do not let the bad weather ruin your 4th of July plans if you're in the States. And if you're in other parts of the world listening in to me, just go about your daily routine. But just keep an eye out on the news and things like that, just to make sure there's no severe weather heading your way, especially as these risk dates approach. So, well, folks, that's pretty much my predictions for the month of July. I hope you liked them and found them useful. I will now provide links to where you can follow me on the Prophecies forum that I belong to. And you can see my predictions for July there firsthand. And also, I'm also going to give a link for where you can find my book, The Prophecies of NUTStradamus, if you would like to buy it from me. So this is it. I will see you guys again before August begins for August predictions. Have a good one, everybody. Nice talking to you. Bye.